Welcome to Stream of Conscience, brought to you by Democracy for America, Fairfield County, where we believe that change is possible and you can make it happen. I'm your host, John Hartwell, and I'm joined by my co-host for this segment, Doug Sutherland. Our guest today is David Brown, an adjunct faculty member at Fairfield University, where he teaches courses in ethics and the environment. David is a public health toxicologist whose current research is focused on reduction of childhood exposures to toxins in air, water, and in consumer products. He founded the toxicology program at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy and at Northeastern University, and he's the former chief of environmental epidemiology and occupational health at the Connecticut Department of Health. Dr. Brown was recently approached by the Heinz Endowments, a foundation focused on Southwest Pennsylvania, to help investigate the effects of hydraulic fracturing, the natural gas extraction method commonly known as fracking. David has assembled a team to help understand and mitigate the public health problems caused by this industrial process. David, welcome to Stream of Conscience.
Thank you for having me.
Doug, give us an introduction to fracking.
Okay, well, fracking is a very complicated and diverse issue that we found out when we met earlier this week to plan this segment. It encompasses political and economic issues, environmental issues, and public safety issues, which is one of the things we're going to focus on most today. But before we get started with that, I think we want our viewers to understand really what fracking is. And so if David, if you could start out with a description of the process of horizontal fracturing.
Yeah, what the process of horizontal fracturing is a way to get gas out of shale beds that are millions of years old and thousands of feet below the ground. What happens is a pipe is drilled down to the bed, then it goes horizontally for as much as a couple of miles, and then there's high pressures are used to drive chemicals down there that will break up the beds and release the gas and other things that are in the bed to come up. Fracturing the idea is to get the natural gas so we can process it. The gas, when it comes up, is not methane only, it's a variety of chemicals, including the chemicals that went down, and it then has to be processed, some of it on the site, some other ways, before it can be pumped into the pipes that eventually go to your house.
So the basic concept here is that there's a lot of gas buried deep in the ground, deposits that were laid there millions of years ago. We drill down to that level, sometimes going horizontally for great distances, and then break up the rock, break up this shale to release the gas and come back to the surface.
With high pressure.
With very high pressures.
And we put sand and other things down there to keep the shale apart once it's open, so the pores stay open, and then the gas is brought to the surface.
And what are some of the components that they put down to break this up?
Well, we know what some of them are, but we don't know what they all are because they're industrial secrets. But we know there's strong acids, there's glycols, there's sand, which goes down, lots of water. To fracture one well takes 200 trailer truck loads of fresh water. So that and other chemicals, which we do not know what they are what's put down the well. Approximately a third of that stays down there and the other 2/3 comes back along with anything else that was in the shale. And that includes radioisotopes, radioactive material, includes organic chemicals, it includes methane, which is what they're after, and many, many salts, because the shale, in fact, is the bottom of an old seabed, an ancient seabed. So you've got ancient water that's down there that's finally being released to the surface.
And this is in western Pennsylvania, where you've been working as part of the Marcellus shale deposits?
Right. It's one of the world's largest deposits of natural gas, and it lies under West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. And from what I've read, that it supplied about 6% of the U.S. natural gas last year, and that's expected to double, I think, by 2020. And so this is an important source of energy for the U.S. Natural gas has been touted as being a savior for us, a bridge from our dependence on foreign oil. And so obviously there's a great interest in this. But the thing we want to focus on is the public health issues, and that's what you've mainly focused on. Monitoring the public health of people that are in and around these wells, and also trying to help them protect themselves from the fallout from this. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with that?
How I got involved with it was a year ago, just about this time. I was asked to go to Pittsburgh for another reason. And when I was there, I was given a tour of the well drilling fields of Washington and Greene County, so I could see what was going on. And I got to meet people that were doing the fracking and also people that were being impacted by it, whose families and whose children were affected, or they thought were affected by the drilling, and people who were concerned that their environment and their water was being contaminated by the drilling. I was asked to react, and I said, this looks very much like the beginning of Superfund sites. So there are health effects. We knew there would be there, and we knew that if you didn't do something about them, people would be hurt.
Right.
And they would be, some of them would be actually injured. Everybody was scared, and that's true in southern Pennsylvania. Everybody lost trust, or many people lost trust in their government, in everyone, and anyone that they had lost tremendous trust in the drillers, and they had lost trust in the public health system, so that no longer was there for those people a public health system. And so we recognized, as I pointed out, that could not be allowed to go forward. Something had to be done to restore to that population the information that they needed so that they could make personal decisions about their health. And so that's a project that we assembled.
You sent an email back to the Heinz Endowment, and you said something needs to be done. And what was their response?
Do it.
Do it.
So.
And you were looking for a job at this point?
No, I was looking to go skiing in Vermont, actually, but I wasn't looking to get involved in this project. I teach philosophy, and I enjoy teaching philosophy, but it was clearly an important problem, and it was clearly going to need special skills, not skills that I necessarily had, but skills that others had to come together, and they needed to be focused on those individuals whose lives were being impacted immediately by this industrial activity. Residential gas extraction, which is what's actually going on, is a very new phenomenon. We've extracted gas for years, but very rarely did we go to residences. There's one town in Texas, Texas, where that happened at great damage to the town, but generally we don't do that where there are people.
So in fact, this is new, going to do drilling for gas where people are living in close proximity.
Yeah, and it's especially new going to drilling for gas in a wet instead of a dry area.
Oh.
Western Pennsylvania it's like Connecticut. It's wet, and there's water. And water is very important, and it flows all over the place. So if you contaminate it, well, in this case, you'll irreversibly damage it. But our concern was that people were drinking this water. They were showering in this water. They were the particles and other things that were coming off of the flaring gas wells were falling on their property, their gardens, their lawns, and they had strange diseases that they were talking about, and we were curious, were the diseases related to the fracking? Were the diseases related to something else? But mostly people had just lost any sense of hopefulness.
Now, when you toured the region, and subsequently when you went back in, you've met people and you've talked with them and you've gotten their stories. Can you share one or two of those with us?
Well, a couple. They're obviously confidential to a sense. So, one story, the story that caused me to not back away, was the story of a little girl who had lost her horse. She'd raised it from a colt. It was as she explained it, it was a champion horse. Whether it was, we'll assume it was. She'd lost her horse, and her brother had been sick, and people were talking about arsenic poisoning. Well, there is arsenic down in the shale, and there were arsenic exposures, and so I asked her if I could see her hands. I'm not a physician, but I'm a toxicologist, and I would have some idea to see. And I said, her hands, she didn't look like she had arsenic poisoning to me, but she may have. And I said to her, I said, thank you, and she was 14 years old, and I said, do you have any other problems, sort of as an afterthought? And she said, no, only the headaches. And I said, tell me about the headache. She described a headache that started at the back of her head and went forward, an organic chemical headache. I said, when do you get it? She says, after I take showers. I said, do you take long showers? She says, I love long showers. She says, but they're gone at noon. And my only words were, take short showers, which is not a public health response. The public health response is stop the exposure. And that's basically what we're looking at.
What was the exposure she was suffering from?
I don't know for certain, but it sounded like a methane headache, and there was methane had gotten into the groundwater. Many of the people in this area, actually their water has been contaminated. Some of it was methane, some with other fracking materials. Some actually was the sand that's put down there. And they've been given water by the industry, provided that they comply with some rules the industry have, which is not complain to the health people.
So, various problems that people are facing as individuals, their health problems. But you've also talked about the political problems that the communities are facing.
The communities are really, I don't want to use the term fractured, but that's really what they are. Some people have gotten royalties, and so they're getting a lot of money from this. Other people are getting nothing. Somebody will have agreed to have fracturing and drilling on their property right next to, or upwind from yours, or up water gradient from yours, and so some people's property is being damaged. Others are getting rich by it. Some people are are absentee owners, and so the towns have lost any ability to control the problem. And if the towns wanted to control the problem, they really can't, because the federal energy laws have said that you cannot enforce the Clean Water Act or the Clean Air Act in energy extraction such as fracking. So that the people have virtually no options. The state is trying to do a little bit, but those individuals that are there have clearly lost confidence in the state. Whether they should have or not is another debate. But because they have, there's a really great danger if you think about it, because if somebody is thinking that their headache is coming from a gas drilling next door, and their focus is on stopping the gas drilling, but their headache is really a brain tumor, by the time you realize it's a brain tumor, it's too late. So the people simply have to have confidence in the resources.
Well, it looks like there's a real asymmetry of information here. Is that the gas drilling companies are the ones that have most of the information, and they're not divulging it, and the citizens who really need information don't have it.
That's pretty much correct. Right. It may be that gas companies don't have it either, because when you fracture shale a mile or so below ground, right, you have no idea what's coming up either. So right, it's not clear that anybody knows what's happening. Right. But the one thing that is clear, that people are reacting to it. Animals are dying. People are having headaches. They're having nosebleeds. They come on, and other effects they talk about, which is what we decided the demarcation point on this project had to be the people's health.
And so your response, and you're being funded now by the Heinz Endowment, yeah, and you've put together a team, and you're trying to respond to the public health issues that are coming from this, not the political issues, not the environmental degradation issues directly, no, but you're just trying to mitigate what the problems that are showing up in the public health arena. Can you talk about your team and the work that you're doing?
Sure. You got to remember, I teach environmental ethics in a philosophy department, and humanity and not lying is a strong issue with people in that area. Actually, what we decided that you needed to do was to find a good leader. And there was a good leader down there, Raina Ripple, who had been worked for the Physicians for Social Responsibility in Maine. She'd worked for the Coalfield Justice people, and she was a strong leader. People trusted her. And so the first thing, we needed a person that was trusted. We needed people who understood public health, and we had 2 graduates of Yale, PhDs, who'd worked in health departments, and they knew how to do health investigations, so we were able to assemble those. We knew that we needed someone who understood environmental medicine, and we found an environmental physician who's joined our team. We've got a public health expert from Maine who had been part of the Maine Lung Association, who is on our team. I'm a toxicologist. We have a management expert on our team, and we were fortunate because this project of this sort is just a management nightmare, and the people I've described to you are not good managers. So we were fortunate to get a person, John Suggs, who had done this before. He had worked in industry, he had worked in academics, and he had actually worked in Los Angeles on the issue of homelessness. So, but he had managed large projects, and so he joined us. And so we put this group of people together. We came across, by luck, an engineer from Saudi Arabia who had actually done some of this kind of work and had been responsible for compliance, so we got that person on our team. So we're still building the team, but we think we have the core of what we need. We've actually talked to physicians who've been treating people. We've talked to individuals that are there. There are other people, other organizations that are also doing working on the gas shale. Others have done surveys in Texas and Wisconsin and Wyoming, and some in Pennsylvania. So we've also brought that group, we've brought the information from that group together. So what we're trying to do is to put something out there that will work. We are not trying to stop gas exploration, but we are absolutely committed to stopping unsafe exposures to people for any reason at all. We don't need gas that badly in this country that we're willing to sacrifice people.
And you're putting in place a center.
We've built a center. We've actually are putting a center in Washington County, Pennsylvania. There about 3,000 wells have been drilled in that area in the last 2 years. So there's a lot of people that are hurting. The wells are being drilled all through Pennsylvania, and drilling will start in New York at some point. There's the University of Pittsburgh had a group called CHEC, Communities for Environmental, can't remember the other pieces of it, action that looked at water and looked at the Monongahela River and the contaminants of the water in the Monongahela River, because once the fracking fluid comes up, it's contaminated, and that fracking fluid was being put through water treatment plants and dumped into the Monongahela.
Now,
that's the water source for Pittsburgh.
That's the water source for Pittsburgh, and you said that they're likely to start drilling in New York. I understand that Governor Cuomo has relaxed the regulations somehow. I guess I have a question about...
really know what's going to happen in New York.
Okay. What about Connecticut?
We don't have fracking. We don't have shale.
We don't have the shale.
No, at least not the Marcellus. There may be shale further down, but we don't have it.
And there has been recently, the Delaware River Valley Commission was supposed to vote, I think, 21st of November. They postponed that vote on new regulations. And I think most environmentalists think that's a good thing, because at least there's a moratorium, I think, right now in the Delaware River Valley on this. And so more information is going to be gathered. I think they're pushing for the EPA to do a more thorough study before they make a vote. So there are things going on that are somewhat hopeful. And in Congress, there's the Frack Act, which is supposed to hopefully if it can get some steam and get passed, it'll force these companies to open up the chemicals that they're using in this process. So,
The problem is that coming up from the shale are these salts from that brine sea. And once they get into the water system, the water table can be just lost. And once it's lost, it's lost. And the Delaware water area is the water supply for Philadelphia, Washington.
Right, I think 15 million people get
15 million people.
their
So you really
drinking
need to
water.
be thoughtful. I think if we had I hate to say go back to square one because it's trite, but I really think we got to go back to square one and say if you want to get this shale, then you've got to check every single step along the way. You cannot have subcontractors hauling contaminated water around. You cannot be putting sand that causes silicosis into the environment.
Right.
Well, David, it's an incredible story, and hopefully the center that you're putting in Washington County will help the people there, and what you learn through all of this will be able to be used elsewhere as this moves forward, because it clearly says so much money behind this, it's going to be difficult to slow it down.
I think it's going to be impossible to stop it, but I think it may be possible to say to people, to the people of the country, we aren't that kind of people. Right. We will not sacrifice human beings for energy.
I mean, this is very similar to the Keystone Pipeline issue. It's pitting job creation and cheap energy against environmental and public health issues. So it's going to be on the agenda for a very long time. And we really appreciate you coming in and bringing this to our awareness. And thank you for the work that you're doing for the people of Western Pennsylvania.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And now, a stream of conscience commentary with Doug Sutherland.
When George Bissell and Edward Drake struck oil near Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1859, the primary use of oil in the U.S. was for lighting and medicinal purposes. The internal combustion engine was still being perfected, and our industrialized economy was dependent on other sources of energy. With larger oil and natural gas finds in the Midwest, East Texas, and the Gulf, the era of cheap oil rapidly transformed the nation. The U.S. became the world's #1 oil producer, and our love affair with the automobile took off, along with our dependence on plastics and other petrol-based products and technologies. A century and a half later, much has changed. The U.S. has dropped to third place among oil-producing nations, and we now depend on foreign sources of oil for 70% of our needs. And unlike in 1859, when oil would literally burst forth from the earth or possibly require pumping from relatively shallow depths, today, new oil and gas finds are harder and harder to extract. Unfortunately, we are now addicted to cheap oil. Our entire lifestyle and social structure depend on it. But the price is going up, and the detrimental environmental effects of burning fossil fuels are increasingly apparent. But like a junkie addicted to heroin, we seem only to care about where to get our next fix. The controversial gas extraction technique called hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, is just one of many dilemmas facing our nation today as we try to hang on to a lifestyle and an economy dependent on and addicted to cheap energy. The gas industry has been touting natural gas as the bridge to the renewable energy economy of the future. But as we've seen, this supposedly abundant supply of natural gas lies trapped miles below the earth in ancient shale deposits, and the extraction of this gas pits our need for cheap domestic energy against our need to protect the environment and the public health. Technology has given us amazing new techniques to drill miles below the earth, but those techniques are far from safe and far from clean. As the BP Gulf oil spill of 2010 showed, huge environmental accidents can happen in the fossil fuel extraction business, and in our search for cheap energy, company executives, engineers, and government regulators are all too willing to look the other way. Harm to public health and the environment are the collateral damage. Fracking has been implicated in many health issues. It can and has polluted water supplies, and it may even be responsible for increased earthquake activity in regions where gas drilling has expanded. A similar dilemma faces our nation with the Keystone XL pipeline project. The existing Keystone pipeline connects the Athabasca tar sand fields in northeastern Alberta, Canada, to refineries in Illinois and Oklahoma. Like natural gas shale deposits, tar sands are another energy solution that is touted to reduce our dependence on Middle Eastern oil. But tar sand oil extraction is one of the dirtiest sources of crude oil available. Like fracking, the process of extracting the bitumen oil from tar sands requires great quantities of water and a local source of energy to produce steam to process the bitumen into synthetic oil before sending it down the pipeline. In addition, extraction from this unconventional oil source has been estimated to release twice the greenhouse gases as that of conventional crude oil extraction. As with fracking, we are risking the air, water, and the planet for the chance to get our next fix of cheap energy. The Republican drill baby drill crowd are pushing President Obama to approve an extension to the existing pipeline, a project called Keystone XL. This pipeline would expand the flow of this dirty synthetic oil from the Canadian tar sand fields south to Oklahoma and on to the Gulf states. Along the way, the XL pipeline would pass through environmentally sensitive areas, including the Ogallala Aquifer, a vast underground aquifer located beneath the Great Plains. One of the world's largest freshwater reservoirs, the Ogallala provides drinking water for 2 million people and supports $20 billion in agriculture. A pipeline spill could contaminate the aquifer and devastate the Midwestern economy. Is our next fix of cheap fossil fuel really worth those risks? Al Gore made the term inconvenient truth famous with his book tour warning about climate change. It may well turn out that the greatest inconvenient truth is that our modern society, built on cheap fossil fuel, is simply no longer sustainable. Those on the right would say that the free market will solve all these problems. But the market is far from free today, with massive government subsidies supporting our continued use of dirty, non-renewable sources of energy, and the externalities of environmental damage and public health degradation are almost by definition external to market forces, unless we make sure they are included. It's time for us to start building the renewable energy economy of the future today, and stop promoting dirty fossil fuel solutions that are nothing more than a bridge to nowhere and a danger to our health and planet. I'm Doug Sutherland, and this has been a Stream of Conscience commentary. Thanks for watching.
That's our show for this week. We hope you enjoyed it. If you live in the town served by Cablevision from Norwalk, you can catch our show every Wednesday on Channel 88 at a new time of 8 p.m. If you're interested in learning more about progressive political action in Fairfield County, please check out our Democracy for America group. We meet the first Wednesday of the month, 7 to 9 p.m. at the Silver Star Diner in Norwalk, and we always welcome new members. Remember, change is possible, and you can make it happen. This has been Stream of Conscience, and I'm your host, John Hartwell. We hope to see you again soon.